People are still joining in, but since the time is almost 7:02, I would like to start. Hello, I'd like to welcome you all to the research presentation event. My name is Hiromi Shizawa, the chair of the sociology department at George Washington University. I'll be moderating tonight's event titled Introducing Fraudulent Power Model, Unquestioned Power Behind Corporate Crimes in Japan. Before I introduce our panelists, I would like to thank our co-sponsor, SIGA Center for Asian Studies at George Washington University. In particular, I'd like to thank Adam Ubanki and Richard Haddock for making this event possible. I also thank Heather Harper for Sociology Department for her wonderful support. A few housekeeping matters to be addressed. After Dr. Takaoka's presentation, Dr. Endo will offer his comments. I will then ask Dr. Takaoka to respond to his comments. Then I will open up to audience to ask questions. As you listen to the talk, please place questions to Q&A box that is located at the bottom of the screen. We appreciate if you could identify yourself, such as name and your institutional affiliation when you place your questions. Now I'd like to introduce our panelist, Dr. Asuka Takaoka. Dr. Takaoka is a professor at the Graduate School of Management at Globus University in Tokyo, Japan. Currently, she is a visiting scholar of Sociology Department at GW. Her research focuses on corporate governance, in particularly white-collar crimes and business ethics. She's working on a book that focuses on CEO nomination and leadership experience. Prior to her academic career, she has done consulting work in various countries, including Germany, UK, and Japan. Next, I would like to introduce our discussant, Dr. Takahiro Endo. Dr. Endo is an associate professor of business school at the University of Victoria. His research focuses on translation of sustainability ideas and practice in business and management, and legal structure and business organizations, to name a few. And he has conducted 2 JSPS-funded research projects examining corporate lobbying and its impacts in transnational and new economic sectors. He also has been part of funded interdisciplinary projects examining the translation of renewable energy, menstruation in higher education, and gender issues in professional service firms. Without further ado, I would like to welcome the presenter to deliver the presentation. Dr. Takaoka, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you for a kind introduction, Dr. Shizawa. Good evening, everybody, and good morning to my friends joining from Japan, India, and across Asia. So I'm delighted to present my research about corporate crimes that I have been working for many years, both academically and professionally. So the title of my presentation today is Introducing Fraudulent Power Model, the Unquestioned Power Behind Data Falsification Crimes in Japan. So let's start with some background and objectives. As you know, we have seen unprecedented levels of corporate frauds happening across the globe, and more so in the wake of COVID-19. Despite the fact that many governments have enacted anti-fraud laws, strengthened penalties, and also repeatedly enforced corporate governance codes, this increasing trend of frauds hasn't got reversed. And in Japan, where I'm from, for instance, the number of accounting frauds has doubled over the past 10 years. And notably in the US, Germany, and Japan, even prominent automobile firms or manufacturing firms have engaged in repeated data falsification crimes. If you remember in 2017, when a series of data falsification happened, the former Prime Minister Suga stated that these frauds harmed the trust and competitiveness of the entire Japanese manufacturing industries. So such corporate fraud, once it happens, can gravely damage not only a firm's reputation, shareholders, employees, but also the public and society. Hence, fraud prevention is a crucial agenda for everybody. And given the situation, I started this research with the objective of providing types of power as fraud risk indicators and serve as a trigger for banks, shareholders, authorities, and broader stakeholders to assess the status quo and take preventive measures to address the latent causes of fraud. As an introduction, let me start with some definitions. So when you say white-collar crimes or corporate crimes, corporate frauds, actually there are two types of crimes. One is the occupational crimes, i.e. individuals crimes, and the other is corporate crimes, i.e. organizational crimes. And occupational crimes are those committed against the firm for the benefit of the individual. So the examples include embezzlement, insider dealing, inappropriate use of company resources, theft, bribery, and kickbacks. Whereas corporate crimes are those committed for the benefit of the corporation. So in some cases, the perpetrators can be victims of the company. And the examples include antitrust violation, collusion, financial statement faking, cover-ups, and data falsification. And the present work examined the latter, corporate crimes, because the objective of doing this research is to understand fraud from the viewpoint of unhealthy organizational power dynamics rather than individual psychological perspectives. Now, since the 1950s, so organizational theorists have long argued the power issues, but predominantly using the sample of accounting frauds, while data falsification fraud has received very little attention, mainly due to the lack of data availability. Regardless of mounting incidents, which have caused significant blows to stakeholders globally. And you might be surprised, but this data falsification crimes actually account for the second largest portion following accounting frauds out of all types of corporate crimes. Now, what I mean by data falsification frauds here is that all falsification of documents, whatever falsification documents to manipulate the results of, for instance, quality assurance, inspection reports, or customer specifications. But the majority of cases actually happened at automobile companies, as well as related manufacturing companies, to falsify data on their inspection reports regarding EGR, emission gas regulations. Because the standard of this EGR is very high, many automobile companies basically falsify the data to meet this standard, which happened across Germany, US, and Japan. We're going to show the list in a minute. So the present work tries to reveal the types of power and the mechanisms underlying understudied data falsification crimes in Japan between 2015 and 2022. So literature review. For several decades, the fraud triangle model, as you see here on the left-hand side, proposed by Dr. Cressy, provide the answer to the question, why frauds happen from individual perspectives. So basically, the fraud triangle model identified three critical factors: opportunity, pressure, rationalization, that make people commit fraud. So they basically regarded individuals' morality as the key causal explanation of fraud behavior. However, corporate crimes happen in an organizational, social context, encompassing the sociological interplay between individual motivations and contextual characteristics. So in a way, both individuals and organizations are the actors of corporate crimes. And beyond that, building on that, Many scholars have argued that, therefore, corporate crimes happen because of power rather than the visuals incentives. So in this sense, therefore, the fraud triangle models does not fully explain about how large groups of individuals become involved in fraudulent behavior. So to fill these gaps, subsequent research examined this unhealthy organizational power, focusing on its dynamics between two individuals. So for instance, as you see here, dyad reciprocal model laid out the mechanism where individuals are recruited to participate in financial statement fraud scheme, extending the French and Raven taxonomy of power model. Furthermore, Kraus and Schnatterly explore this power dynamics between two top executives sitting on the board to understand why CEOs engage in wrongdoing. However, again, these models do not fully explain the mechanism of broader types nor processes of organizational flows beyond these specific schemes. Again, organizational flows can happen not only between two individuals, but within larger systems. So therefore, to sum up the literature review quickly, firstly, previous research has examined this power dynamics between two individuals. However, to our knowledge, a very few studies have comprehensively considered the power mechanism among multiple stakeholders involved in organizational crimes. And additionally, accounting fraud has been disproportionately explored, with little attention devoted to other types of critical frauds, such as data falsification crimes. Furthermore, the calls for action regarding how fraud is committed and how frauds are experienced for those involved haven't yet fully answered. Hence, to fill these gaps, this study tries to answer the following two research questions. First, what types of power are exercised in data falsification crimes? And what is a mechanism wherein white-collar employees commit data falsification crimes? To answer these questions, we examined 35 third-party committee flow reports about data falsification crimes issued by listed firms sitting in the first section of Tokyo Stock Exchange that happened between 2015 and 2022. So what is the third-party committee flow reports? Let me explain. In Japan, listed firms are required to establish a committee composed of a group of lawyers and auditors once fraud is exposed. And the lawyers conduct thorough investigations, including digital forensic surveys, interviewing with all stakeholders and questionnaires and so on. And the results are then reported back to the firm's board of directors, and the firm issues an external report. So this final report includes abundant interview comments, narrative interview comments made by every stakeholders involved in the fraud, and is written by third-party perspectives because the lawyers basically write up the report. And all reports essentially follow the same structure, starting from summary, facts, details, including all interview comments, analysis of causes, and prevention measures. In terms of the volume, the reports have 69 pages on average in A4 sizes, which gives us a final sample of 35 reports. And we excluded shorter papers, less than 10 pages. And this is the overview of 35 third-party committee for reports, which is publicly available. Now, method. So we have employed qualitative analysis because firstly, the objective is to understand the nature of corporate crimes, thereby constructing the mechanism rather than analyzing the frequency. While I have been doing a quantitative analysis since my doctorate days, I always wanted to understand what's actually happening behind these corporate crimes. Why do so successful, smart, white-collar employees cross the line despite knowing the serious potential consequences of doing so? And how they are pushed into the corner where there's no other solutions, than committing frauds. And also, we are still at an early stage of theory building of identifying organizational power factors behind corporate frauds. And regarding the procedures, we follow the grounded theory approach using numerous levels of analysis instead of employing a single case studies. Because the grounded theory approach requires a constant comparison. This need for constant comparison best fits with the nature of our rich interview data and our aim to sharply identify unhealthy power dynamics behind cases. But most importantly, because we aim to present a highly generalizable model. So hence, rather than analyzing a single or several cases, we have explored multiple comparable cases, as many as possible. So coding analysis steps, we first extracted all interview comments from the reports and created a unique database. And I coded all interview comments, about 896 comments relating to unhealthy power, instead of following theoretical saturation procedures, because we hope to capture a comprehensive picture of data falsification crimes. And I started from open coding and with constant comparisons, really focused on distinct behaviors and reactions reflecting this power dynamic. So we looked at both behaviors of doers and receivers, orders or different receivers, and reduced the initial 26 categories into 13 categories through actual coding. Actual coding means a further testing of the relationship between categories and subcategories against data. And I further refine those categories. And through selective coding, we have developed the final 3 core categories I'm going to present in a minute in what you call fraudulent power model. And lastly, for validity testing and triangulation purposes, I presented the developed model to non-executive directors, as well as auditors who are knowledgeable about corporate frauds, immediate member of an editorial board with expertise in corporate governance, and of course, several researchers, particularly criminologists. And I've recently presented this model at the University of Maryland at the Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice. So those feedback suggestions were all incorporated into the final model. So this is the results, preliminary model that we call fraudulent power model. So the results revealed 3 core categories: norm power, formal power, and neglect power, as well as their supporting organizational dysfunctions. So organizational dysfunctions can serve as a circumstantial prerequisite for data falsifications, which include various conditions, such as power disparity among divisions. What I mean by that is that, for instance, quality assurance divisions tend to have less power compared with the manufacturing or production or research department, or even sales department, which forced quality assurance people to falsify data, particularly when they're busy toward the end of the term, but they need to make shipments as soon as possible. Lack of independence, what I mean by that is that if the quality assurance division sits under a large manufacturing department, their behaviors, their actions are affected by the interests of the entire manufacturing department or production department. Another example is absence of supervising risk auditing, so lack of governance from the headquarters or organizational failures creates a hole of reporting flow, eventually leading to fraud. And other examples include resource shortage, tight delivery deadlines, immobilized talent to work personalization, HR failures, system failures, poor facilities, and so on. Formal power originates from a senior position and is manifested in the form of orders or direct pressure from leaders, as has long been argued. By norm power and neglect power, in this context have been newly identified in our study, we believe. And norm power, i.e. the company's DNA, is that employees perceive as inherent, and therefore they naturally follow it without doubting or arguing, which can result in fraud. And norms are not necessarily verbalized or documented anywhere in the company. However, especially in immobilized organizations with a long-standing history, these norms are inscribed deep into employees' minds, thus defining employees' code of conduct. Such norms include phenomena, for instance, sales profit supremacy, production delivery supremacy, excessive error-free policy, following predecessors' practice, non-intervention theory, blind obedience to customers, avoidance of inconvenient truths, defensiveness for the sake of firm reputation, perceived futility of reporting. I'm gonna provide some description in a minute. But norm power, anyhow, it's so deeply inscribed that the mere combination of norm power and formal power can lead to fraud. That's the black arrow on the left-hand side. Now, lastly, we can't overlook this neglect power that you see on the right, bottom right, which encompasses leaders' negligence, tacit approval, and indifferences towards the seeds of frauds or actualized frauds. Neglect brings about silence, where unhealthy norms can easily lead to fraud, even without any formal power. So herein, neglect power functions as a substitute of formal power. And ultimately, we identify the combination of norm power and neglect power supported by dysfunction, organizational dysfunctions, as the most common mechanism for Japanese data falsification crimes. So let me quickly explain about selected norm power and categories. So sales profit supremacy is where employees are overly pushed to increase sales profit at any cost, which can trigger frauds. Production delivery supremacy is a timely production and delivery comes first, then follow quality assurance, unfortunately, which can lead to falsifying documents or skipping some of the tests, inspection tests or QA tests. Excessive error-free policies is where employees have a perception that they can never ever make mistakes, otherwise they would go down as critical faults. Non-intervention theory is where there is a culture where each function is too independent and blindly respect what other functions say or do, thereby failing to monitor mutually with each other. Blind obedience to customers, meaning that employees blindly address clients' requests to the extent of committing frauds, as they believe they can never lose the deal. Neglect power. So the first step is negligence. They're both individual and an organizational negligence, though. One example is that a simple absence of required knowledge and interest of management or headquarters can lead to data falsification. Lack of governance from the headquarters creates a whole of reporting flow, eventually leading to frauds. Indifference is synonymous with the ostrich policy, meaning the tendency to ignore obvious matters and pretend they do not exist. Lastly, tacit approval is that leaders or senior management CEOs give tacit approval to skip some steps of inspections or to falsify test results, where the fraudulent procedures have already continued for a long time due to resource shortage, along with very tight delivery schedule, and became a habit, and where stakeholders have the same interest to defend their reputation by covering them up. So lastly, we talk about contributions, limitation, and suggestions for future research. I do see that this present work needs further improvement because it's still preliminary. But I suppose at least we achieved 2 contributions. First, this research identified the 13 types of power that can be categorized into 3 core categories, as well as empirically grounded framework, which illustrates unhealthy organizational power dynamics behind the current understudied data falsification crimes. And practically speaking, the firms may be able to refer to these types of power as fraud risk indicators. But the biggest limitation is that probably the second coding. So we should invite a second coder to conduct at least 20-30% random sampling, as is suggested by Capra. And in terms of suggestions for future research, I am very interested in investigating the entire legal document of large-scale organizational fraud. For instance, Moritomo case, to really clarify the process and the interplay among 3 power factors, because I believe that such studies may help advance the organizational fraud and power literature even further. Lastly, I believe that more studies are needed across different fraud types and cultural context to better understand the mechanism behind corporate fraud, given the significant nature of the matter. All right, thank you so much. That's all from me. And I will, I'll give it back to Dr. Ishizawa.
Thank you. You're perfect on time. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Okay, so now, Dr. Endo, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a really fascinating presentation. Maybe my share screen doesn't work, so let me just change to directly to this presentation slides from my desktop. So I'm Takahiro Endo. I belong to both University of Victoria in Canada and also Kobe University in Japan. And so I have 3 agendas today. But before that, I feel happy to look at this presentation as well as, so Asuka actually sent me the short paper in advance, and it was a really fascinating paper. And so 3 agendas today. So first one, so key summary of the presentation. So I believe this is maybe a little bit exaggerated, but nonetheless, I believe this can facilitate the discussion much more. And also second issue is clarification questions for the sake of clarifying some issues which Asuka brought, and maybe my question might be helpful to clarify such sort of issues. And finally, my suggestions for further improving this fascinating study. So maybe first one is so let's go one by one. And the first issue is Asuka's research from my point of view. So summarizing very briefly and also a little bit more exaggerated way. And so according to Asuka, so there are 2 different types of streams of occupational crime research. And first stream, so maybe chat box, sorry. If you have any questions, okay. Sorry. It was not really for me. And so occupational stream, so which is about opportunity causes crime. And so this is associated with money. So if there's safe money-making opportunity, then individuals commit crime. So which is about the first stream of literature. And second stream of literature is about corporate stream, and which is all about corporate hierarchy, organizational hierarchy. So maybe boss he or she directs you and subordinate cannot really say no to that sort of order. So that's our two different streams. And so Asuka's empirical context is Japan, and white-collar crimes in Japan is neither opportunities nor hierarchy explain this phenomenon. So opportunity-wise, so if you look at those 35 cases from listed companies, money does not really explain why they committed such a risky crime. So that's the first important and interesting findings. And second interesting findings are so hierarchy doesn't really matter. So it's important still, as Asuka's slide a little bit touched on this issue, but hierarchical power doesn't itself explain white-collar crimes in Japan. So which is also very fascinating. So congratulations, you found really interesting phenomena. So that's really worth paying close attention. So, and so I have two clarification questions. The first clarification question is, so maybe your literature review is a little bit information overloaded. So you have lots of factors, but maybe we need a little bit more simplified understanding of the entire whole picture of this white-collar crimes literature. And so in that sense, does this table help or not? So I'm not sure, but maybe my way of understanding is, so if you look at the economic incentive and power relation, and power relation is more like hierarchical, in your word, maybe formal power. And if those are economic incentive is strong and power relation is strong, so that's a typical corporate and occupational crime. And maybe this is widely acknowledged in the previous study. And also, so there's some studies where the economic incentive is very strong, so which is here. So typical occupational crime stream was looking at this type of crime. And also, if you look at the economic incentive is strong, but maybe hierarchical cover is not really strong. Maybe this is but still captured by those people in the organizational crime literature people. But your focus is neither those two factors were weak. So economic incentive was weak, and also power relation was quite weak. So maybe this might be your focus, and can we understand this way? And if that might help. So that's my first clarification question. And second clarification question was, so I was looking at your presentation today as well, and still I was not sure whether this was a case or not. And so my question was, so information availability question. So your so in your short paper, as well as today's presentation, you touched on the lack of data availability thus far. And it seems, or it sounds, you said this lack of data availability regarding this white-collar crime is a global trend. But nonetheless, you are presented really rich 35 case studies from Japan. So would you mean this is so in Western society or the rest of the world except Japan? So it's really difficult to get this type of white-collar crime data, but Japanese situation, it's somehow maybe legal structure or somehow maybe a regulation allows you to collect such sort of data. As you said, it's a third-party committee needs to be established. It's a kind of mandatory. So is it Japan-specific, or it's also you can see in different parts of the world? So that's my second clarification question. And so that's my from my clarification, and suggestions are about maybe in order to improve your paper further, this very fascinating project. So you need to consider these alternative factors or maybe counter hypothesis. And so now it's your way of developing this paper is so you need new conception of power. So that's your route you currently choose. But yeah, you may need to test some different type of kind of alternative or competing hypotheses, competing factors. And I brought just 3 such sort of examples. And maybe first is past dependence. And so if you look at Japanese corporate sectors, so this so past dependency is usually used to explain phenomena, which is not really efficient or socially good, but it's nonetheless it continues. For example, like QWERTY keyboard, which is not really efficient, but it's still because of this history matters, and it continued to be reproduced in the 21st century. And so this past dependence might be somehow explains this white collar crimes in Japan. So that's my first maybe competing hypothesis. And second is, so myself is also part of this study. And so we are looking at the big 4 accounting firms globally. And so and Japan seems to be quite specific. So and in a way, they don't really work for money, but it's for more for honor and duty. So does this also apply to your case? So maybe it sounds a bit weird, but maybe those who commit white collar crimes in Japan, they actually did that for the sake of honor, or maybe duty. So that might be one possibility. So that's the second competing hypothesis. And third is about legitimacy. So it's a maybe traditional, maybe sociological concept. And so Sackman's 1995 paper, you may already know. And so maybe so legitimacy is important if you consider the logic of consequence on the one hand and logic of appropriateness on the other hand. So logic of consequence is about maybe calculation of money, calculation of power relations, but it's not about legitimacy. Legitimacy is about logic of appropriateness. So because this is appropriate in the specific situation, so they commit crime. So does this logic of appropriateness explains this white collar crimes in Japan or not? So that's maybe third competing concept. And final suggestion is so but you still maybe are really determined to go for this power model route, and in that case maybe further clarification may be necessary. And for example, Stephen Hughes, he's a really maybe the guru of power conception, and so his work already 20,000 citations. So maybe it's unthinkable to avoid his work, citing his work to further develop your study. So and he was talking about 3 dimensions of power, and so and in particular this decision-making power and agenda setting power. So these are conflictual. And so this looks very much similar to your notion of formal power. But so he was also talking about interest shaping power. So individual's interest is shaped by somebody else. And that's somehow not really conflictual, but it's people take it for granted. And so this really looks similar to your notion of non-power, and also maybe neglect power as well. So I just wanted to know, I mean, to see the kind of differentiation from these there's 3 dimensions of power from what your new model of power. And lastly, good luck for this really important and interesting study. And so because you sent me just a short paper, but and I understand this is still work in progress, and I really look forward to reading your full paper. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dr. Endo. And this is the audience. If you have any questions, please place your question in a Q&A box that is situated at the bottom of the screen. We will be revisiting your questions in a minute. But Dr. Takaoka, would you like to respond to Dr. Endo's comments?
Of course. So thank you so much, Dr. Endo, for thoroughly reading my paper and also providing very insightful suggestions as well as clear clarifying questions. So first of all, regarding your suggestion, let me start with your suggestions. If you could also share the screen again, that would be fantastic. In terms of your suggestion too, yeah, sorry, okay. So, sorry, the first suggestion, sorry.
Okay.
Yes, out of these 3 options, I think that the second one, honor and duty, and plus responsibleness, being responsible, responsibility might be more, I would say, aligned with my concept, because legitimacy, I do understand, and I've seen this concept probably in US or European cases more, but when I looked at when I really looked through the Japanese corporate crimes, basically they don't earn any money at all, but they just do, in many cases, they don't receive any orders direct, just because of from their own responsiveness or honors or duty, sense of duties, is the starting point of falsifying data. So I think the second one probably would be the most relevant, and probably I'm really kind of excited about kind of linking my findings with this concept, if that's possible. And also past dependence, of course, it's really related, but I think I need to think about more how to link or how to kind of combine or maybe segregate these 2 concepts, or maybe combine. That's my reaction. And if I answer to your 2 clarification questions, the second one, so let me start with the second one. Yes, this is based on the global trend, because when I have been attending this academic conference, when I talked with the US and European and scholars, they always said that, they don't have data. So this rich third-party fraud committee data is available. Although obviously they have legal document if they have an access after a couple of years of happening. So I think we are very in a fortunate situation that in Japan, listed firms are required to, to publish this rich data, third-party fraud reports. So meaning that, yes, I have actually went through this 133 all corporate crimes fraud reports as a doctoral thesis. So yes, this is more information that's available. But what I'm thinking a bit challenges going forward is that obviously legal documents is much rich, right? For instance, Moritomo case, the pages of the legal document, it's more than 500 pages, although we haven't had access. So I'm really interested in, analyzing the legal document for a specific, very important, significant case as a next step. Because fraud third-party reports, yes, it is really rich, but still has some limitations now because it's written by lawyers' perspectives. So their subjectivities might coming up to some extent, which you can't kind of really segregate. We can't really separate. And your first question, I was really amazed. I really like this Story, yes. My focus is definitely the bottom right. So basically economic incentive weak and hierarchical power relation is weak as well. The challenge is, however, when I was writing the paper is that how to clearly define where to draw the line between these typical corporate crimes and my focus as a definition. Because in order to really explain the differences between corporate crimes and my focus, the only way I came up at the time period is that to kind of really show the real example and explain, maybe show some constructs or factors that differentiate 2 items. But I wasn't a bit sure about where to draw the line in terms of definitions, which I need to come up. But definitely this clarifications is needed, I think, in my full paper. I totally agree with that. Thank you so much. Is that clear? But But overall, thank you so much. And I'm really excited to finishing up this final report, the final paper.
Great, thank you. We have a couple of questions, so I will go over one by one. And first is John Tack from the Foresight FinTech Accelerator Center, Canada, Japan Society of British Columbia, asked that he would like to see the table over the road again, companies.
There you go.
Okay. John, if you have any questions to follow up on this one, please do press, or you can raise your hand so we can unmute you. But in the meantime, I will address one question that came from Professor from Buntman from our sociology department, George Washington University. She says, thanks for this very interesting and fine presentation. And so the question is, to what extent might you typology of organizational power, norm, formal, neglect apply in other institutional contexts such as government agencies, universities, and religious groups? Dr. Takaoka.
Interesting question. Thank you so much. Well, I haven't actually really analyzed the crimes in the political context, meaning that's government-related crimes yet, and neither university religious groups. However, the corporate crimes that I have examined is based upon both subordinate relationships. This hierarchy, this structure, this organizational structure is the basis of this corporate crimes happens. In that sense, probably this would be applied, this could be kind of relevant, at least government agency and universities, because to some extent, the prerequisite share with these institutions. However, I'm not sure really about religious groups, which I need to kind of think about. And just to add, for the next step, I am really interested in looking at these political crimes. Then after that, probably I think I can give you a more clear answer.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Okay. So while I wait more questions or hands to be raised, I have one question, or to some extent expand what you have presented, because I know you are working on 2 papers using this type of data, and you mentioned that you're working on this as using qualitative methods, but you said you're working on the quantitative side of this data. Is this the same data, or are you finding there's some interesting stories to tell by comparing to those 2 types of research?
No, actually, for the quantitative analysis that I have been working many years, it's based upon a database. So the DVs is the fraud occurrence, the occurrence of fraud. So it's accountable DVs. And IVs are both compositions, the details directors' backgrounds, for instance, either lifetime directors, mid-career directors, or outside directors, or the tenure, average age, and the background, and so on. And then we looked at the relationships between this board composition and corporate fraud from quantitative perspective. So we're using 2 different data sources, I think. And just for information, the results show that higher share of lifetime directors sitting on the boards is associated with a higher fraud risks. And both composite directors long tenure and higher risk, long tenure and average tenure of directors, really significant positive. So, well, I think I'm looking at this corporate crimes topic from, 2 different perspectives, which I'm gonna, continue doing going forward.
Thank you. Okay, I have one question from our sociology faculty at GW again, Gillian and Brantley. She would like to know, she would like to understand more about the relationship of organizational dysfunction to the types of power.
That's a great question. Thank you so much. So organizational dysfunctions are the facts or the conditions of the targeted fraudulent companies, whereas non-power, formal power, and neglect powers are actions taken by the bosses and also subordinates and then perpetrators. So it's a facts and reactions or behaviors. That's the differences. But I do understand why you made these questions, because these are kind of, how to say, affecting with each other. Because of the dysfunction, organized dysfunctions, for instance, the shortage of human resources or very too tight delivery features, you know, the non-power, the sales profit supremacy gets further heightened, which lead to the fraud. So they definitely, as they are inter-affecting with each other. So to some extent, I see there are some overlaps. So I might need to have more clear kind of explanation about each items. Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, I was not muting myself. Okay, so Dr. Indo, would you like to speak?
Yes, so yeah, very interesting. And one question regarding this study is so if you look at Japanese companies, you can still find some sort of notion of nationalism and also patriotism. And I just wonder whether this type of factors might relate to your study or not. So maybe does that so if you look at those employees who commit this actual crime, do they maybe graduate of Japanese universities, and they are so there's some Japanese employment systems, or so you don't really use much midterm career hirement, and so usually those who work at such large big companies, so that they are employed at the 22, and they continue to work until the retirement. And so do you think that sort of those companies which has this type of vertical crimes, that they are such sort of companies, or they are rather more new type of companies as well? So that like IT sectors, and they rely more on midterm career recruitment, or is there any sort of sample difference?
Interesting question. Thank you. Actually, the majority of this data falsification crimes happened in a very traditional, long-standing companies that kind of represented made in Japan products for many years, right? So in that sense, at least when it comes to the leaders or CEO levels, leadership people might have some idea about this nationalism. So for the sake of this nationalism, they can't disclose this frauds, therefore they cover them up. So that I can see what to some extent I can support to some extent. But when it comes to the actors, the real actors, employee levels, what they just say in this interview comments is that they look only for the company, loyalty to his or her own company. So it's kind of more loyalty to their companies. So they don't want to lose the reputation of their companies. Therefore, they're going to cover them up. They're going to falsify for the short-term interest. So maybe there might be two different layers, the top leadership levels and employees levels. But that's a very, again, interesting perspective. Yeah. Probably need to kind of explore a bit more. But if I, as a next step, if I really explore this government-related crimes, political crimes, more, definitely this nationalism factors would play significantly more, right? So again, thanks for great suggestion.
Any questions from our audience? Don't see any hands. Okay, then Dr. Takaoka, would you like to have summary statements or anything to add to your presentation?
Okay, thank you so much. Very quickly though, if you have any further questions or requests about my paper or whatever, please do contact me via LinkedIn because I'm there. And I'm continuing this corporate crimes research in the US for a couple of years. So I'm really looking forward to kind of keep discussing or, you know, I mean, this or having a chat, even a quite even short chat, so we really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining today. And thank you, Hiromi-san and Endo-san and Richard Adam for this great opportunity.
Thank you. So I'd like to formally end this event by saying thank you to audience and also, let me see. Sorry, one more thing that came in, so I'll just read it. John Tack comments, I found that analytical framework for studying corporate fraud very interesting. It's new for me, and thanks. So thank you. So again, I'd like to thank audience and also the wonderful presentation Dr. Takaoka presented and also insightful comments Dr. Endo provided. And again, thank you for the Sager Center of Asian Studies. And I hope we can have this kind of exciting research presentation event once again. So thank you very much. Have a good evening.